diabetes are actually living during this time and what we're doing to manage our diabetes. Now, I need to point out that the opinions and experiences of the people who are on this chat are not representative of Ipsomed. This is not intended to be medical advice at all. Please always, check with your medical, your healthcare professional for your own diabetes. But over the coming weeks, we're going to explore different topics in more detail. And tonight we have got 3 amazing guests, and we're going to be talking about their personal experiences during lockdown and isolation. What have people been doing? We would love to answer as many questions as possible, and we will endeavour to do that. But we are sorry if we don't get to all of them. We have 80 people who have registered for this webinar tonight, so it could get a little bit chatty throughout the day. But now we have got some amazing guests, and you can see all of them. Now, I have their bios here, but I don't really want to hear myself talk about them. So Frank lives in Perth. He's just celebrated his 10th diversary, his 4th pumpiversary. Frank, how are you going?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm in Perth. I currently work as a receiving storeman. I'm also a fully online uni student. I write a blog, Type 1 Writes, and in my spare time I really like being outside.
Excellent. And it's nice and warm in Perth, or at least it's way warmer than where I am in Melbourne. We also have Rosalind Harris online. She's had type 1 diabetes. She was diagnosed 17 years ago, and she's been pumping for 16 of those years. Ros, how are you tonight? Where are you dialing in from? And tell us something else about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm in Melbourne, like you, Renza. I haven't checked what suburb you're in, so, we might actually be just a street away from each other.
It could be.
It could be. But yeah, I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 42, so I was late onset with type 1. I've been in lockdown with my partner and my 2 adult boys, who are young men, and working, but I'll say some more about that a little bit later, maybe with one of the questions. I lead meditation groups. I am still doing a little bit of work, but not as much as I used to. I'm not studying full-time, Frank, but doing 1 unit. But I'm doing the cheats way. So I'm just auditing, which means I get to sit in, I do the reading, but I don't have to write any essays.
Oh, smart.
So I'm doing the stress-free way of doing it. So yeah, I'm in a choir, I sing, lots of fun things happening.
Oh, well, thanks. It's so lovely to have you here. And we also have Dr. Brigid Knight, who is an accredited practicing dietitian and a credentialed diabetes educator. She works in a multidisciplinary team in Brisbane. Brigid, how are you? It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks, Renza. It's really nice to be here. You want to know something about me. So
I do.
I'm in Brisbane. I'm in the Children's Hospital, and I work in private practice. As both dietitian and diabetes educator, I've been doing this for about 20 odd years, because I don't want to tell you exactly how many. I've just moved into my own rooms in private practice, and it has certainly been challenging getting builders to come in and build when they're trying to maintain their 6-foot distance.
Indeed, yes.
It's been very interesting. So
okay.
From setting up a practice, I have been doing what every other single person in Brisbane has been doing. I've been lining up at Bunnings. Seedlings.
Okay.
Everybody.
Okay, we have got a really great panel. Now, look, we have got some questions, and you get 1 sentence to answer this, so don't and ah about it. You need to share, Frank, I'm starting with you, your top Netflix binge, film, recipe you've made, book you've read, whatever it is, 1 in the last 2 months.
Okay, my favourite binge would be Superstore. Working in retail, okay. I can't believe it's taken me so long to find it.
Oh, I don't know that one. I'm going to have to find that one. Ros, what's yours?
My favourite binge in terms of viewing would be Babylon Berlin.
Okay, all right.
Set in 1929 in Berlin.
Okay, and Brigid?
I haven't had a chance to binge. I've been supervising builders. Favorite recipe, Rocky Road.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
All right. I have been spending my ISO doing a lot of baking. Today I made cinnamon scrolls.
Oh.
I'm so proud of myself. All right, okay. So look, let's get into some questions, and we are focusing on how people have been dealing with their diabetes in the last couple of months. Please do feel free to ask questions if you'd like, and you know, where the topic is what we've been doing and how we've been managing our diabetes in that time. But we're very open to answering questions generally about diabetes as well. So please feel free to ask them. Don't ask us for medical advice. Really, don't do that. But anything else we would absolutely love to answer. So Frank, I'm going to start with you. So how have you found this time in isolation, you know, specifically around your diabetes? And tell me, I mean, don't give me numbers, obviously, but how have your blood sugar levels been going? I'm going to preface this by saying what I'm seeing online from people is either suddenly their diabetes is the perfect, most, you know, placid thing they've ever had to deal with, or the other end, which is it's just a roller coaster and an absolute nightmare. Where are you on that spectrum?
Well, I think I would start by saying that my day-to-day hasn't really changed too much. I'm an essential worker, so I'm still going into work. So it's not a big change in my daily routine. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of blood sugars, the thing that I'm, you know, as the weather's getting colder and, we're heading into winter, I'm just finding that I need a lot more insulin, and it's probably nothing to do with the situation we're going through at the moment. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
And I think that, so your daily routine hasn't really changed that much, has it?
No, not a lot.
Have weekends though changed? Have you found that weekends are sort of more, you know, you're more at home and not venturing out as much as you would have ordinarily?
Yeah, yes and no. Seeing a lot less people, but obviously I'm also buried in uni work on the weekends. So
Yep. Okay, so Ros, what about you? Is your situation similar to Frank's, or have you been experiencing something different there? And what are the real challenges that you've noticed?
Yeah, so in terms of blood glucose, it was one of those moments you talked about, Renza, where it went from being, you know, usually randomly haywire to being perfect. Honestly, I was so smug. I was actually taking photos of the screen because I didn't think it was ever going to happen again. And so I've been one of the lucky ones in that respect. And there's a lot of learning in that for me, really, because unlike you, Frank, there is quite a bit of difference in not major, but I'm not going to work. I run workshops for a living, and nobody wants face-to-face workshops. So all of my work stopped from the start of March, just nothing. And then people were asking, can you do half-day online workshops? But I can't do half-day online workshops because my husband's sitting in the office. I've got an adult son who walks around with no clothes on, with an intellectual disability, who's likely to walk in front of the screen and flash himself to the world. His support workers in the house. It's just, you know, so my work has pretty well disappeared. I'm lucky to be older. I'm nearly 60, so I'm lucky to be older and I'm financially secure. So there's no anxiety around the loss of work. And in fact, I've actually decided that I'm going to retire at the end of the year. So it's actually, this has been the nudge, being in ISO has been the nudge I needed to say my life is full with really wonderful things. The work's getting in the way now. So really, let's get rid of the work. But that combination of not being out with the adrenaline pumping, running workshops, or the distractedness where you forget to take your insulin, even things like having the time to keep a record on a whiteboard of when I needed to change my line. I've never done that before, but I've got more time to focus on the diabetes instead of pretending it's not there. And look what happens as a result. So
I have to say, I'm a bit envious of everyone saying they've got all this newfound time. I wish you could give some of that to me.
No, I haven't had newfound time because I have been working from home, but I have been working so much, you know, it's just been very, very full on. But I have a routine that's far tighter now than ordinarily. Plus, there's not those moments of, you know, the random things that might happen when you're sitting in an office, or I was about to say, you know, if you're running for a tram or something, but I don't run for trams, so you know that's not you know, but those sorts of things that you know, those left of centre, or you know, come out of the blue that you just weren't expecting, and suddenly you know, all those things that are really urgent, which means, oh, I can't change my line even though I really need to do it now, and those sorts of things. So I found my routine has tightened up. My diabetes management, and that's been reflected in what I'm seeing on my CGM screen. So yeah, I think so. But Frank, I'm sorry. Yes, I know people saying that they have lots of extra time. I don't get that either. That hasn't been my experience.
Oh, it certainly looks like it.
Well, it looks like I've got lots of time.
I don't know how you have the energy to bake every day, but yeah.
Baking is
good on you.
No, it de-stresses me. So yeah, it's a good thing. Now, Brigid, so tell me, what is this? The stories that you're hearing from the three of us, is this what you're seeing in your practice? Is this what you're hearing? And is that representative of what's going on with people with diabetes? A bit of everything, really.
It is, and you can't really predict it either. So I saw a fellow yesterday who struggled initially with all the stress of the idea of getting coronavirus, and his levels just went off to the extent that they were as high as what he'd get if he had the flu. So he had a sympathy flu in preparation with all the stress, and he had to amplify his doses for that. And then others are saying, I'm seeing more stable levels in some people. So it's just bringing different things, isn't it? So it's taking away work stress. For some people being at home, they're a lot more stable. Some people being at home, they're eating more. You're in and out of the fridge more, right? I understand everyone's going to gain a few kilos in this process. I understand, especially Renza, if you're baking every day. That's going to change things too, I guess. But it seems to be quite a mixed bag.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that I actually made sure that I stopped following any accounts that were shaming people if they were putting on weight during this time, because I think that, you know, we're all coping however we can and managing the best that we can, and the last thing we need to be doing is having somebody adding an extra thing that we need to be worried about. But I did want to ask you, Brigid, and then Frank and Ros, I'll ask you about your experiences with this. But Brigid, have you had to actually change your service? Have you had to adapt it? Can you talk to us a little bit about, have you gone online and what that's looked like?
Yeah, so we've tried a couple of different platforms, and I think we've all been learning as we go, and I think everyone has had the same situation. You know, you start off and you go, let's try Skype, and then that doesn't quite work for you, and then you go, let's try Zoom, and then Queensland Health goes, well, actually Zoom's not secure, and then, you know, it's FaceTime on your own phone. It's really tricky to find the right platform, and not just the right platform. At the other end, a lot of people can download their devices, but not everyone can.
Yep.
So your poor person at the other end who isn't very tech savvy really struggles to all of a sudden download devices which they used to do in the face-to-face. So that has really been challenging, just getting the data. People have been very happy to have face-to-face, and they still want to maintain those visits, but the technology has been tricky.
Okay, we've got a great comment. Ian Packer says that online gym sessions have been great, and I'm loving seeing how people have been adapting their usual routines and the things that they usually do to be virtual. You know, whether it be online or even gorgeous things of people having birthday parties and people doing drive-bys and waving and that sort of stuff. But Frank, let me start with you here. How have you kept in touch with your healthcare professionals during this time? Have you been going in for visits, or have they all been cancelled, or did you just not have any scheduled? What's happening with you?
So I went to see my GP. That was an in-person appointment.
Yep.
Had my flu shot, and he actually made the comment that he did not have telehealth set up, or that it was too difficult for him, which was quite interesting. And his practice was pretty quiet. So I think he was doing it just as tough as me. Mm-hmm. And then I've also been in the process of getting a new insulin pump. I was due for an upgrade. So that was sort of done over the phone and telephone and email contact. And then I had my pump start last week. I did a face-to-face for that, but I was given the option if I would prefer Zoom.
And how did you feel any, you know, were you worried? Were you concerned? Did you feel any level of concern going in, whether it be to see your GP or to do your pump start, or were you quite comfortable that you knew what safety, were you told what safety practices were in place, and did that make you feel okay?
So the pump start, because that was only a few days ago, so, you know, the situation's obviously improved a lot. So I felt quite comfortable going into the hospital for my appointment, knowing the situation. And yeah, the same with the GP. I felt quite comfortable going in. Yeah,
good. Okay. So what about you, Ros? What have you had contact with your healthcare professionals during the last couple of months, and what's that look like?
I spoke to my endo via telehealth, and it was absolutely successful. It worked really, really well. I was able to download all the data from the pump, get that through to him. Right. So he had all that. The face-to-face is obviously having to go in for your blood tests, you know, to the pathology. And also, like you, Frank, going for flu jabs face-to-face. Can't be done any other way. But there's that sort of, I felt in both situations, I didn't feel nervous at all. It was really clear that the processes were so robust that they had in place that, honestly, I would have been a lot more at risk if I was walking in the supermarket than I would have been going in either to the pathology centre or to my GP there. But I was pleasantly surprised by the telehealth, and even though my endo is not a long way from where I live, it's a damn nuisance getting in the car and trying to park in the inner city, and he's not going to like it, but I'd love to just keep doing it by telehealth. I don't think he's going to buy it.
These are actually going to be some really interesting conversations that I think we're having, because I've heard that from a number of people who have said, you know, this is just so much more convenient for me. I'm still able to get everything I need, and you know, I can download what I need to, but I don't have to sit in traffic to get there, and I don't then need to wait in a waiting room and you know, take off the afternoon from work, and I've got kids, and you know, all of that. I just wonder, we've seen that this works. Now, you know, it's had to work because there's been no choice, but it's kind of gonna, I'm really curious to know how there's going to be a, well, we're just going back now because, you know, it's okay now, but we've seen how it's worked. So I don't know, Brigid, what do you think about that?
Agree. Before we had COVID, I had a couple of young women with young children who we agreed would do telehealth to, because they didn't have to get in traffic, they didn't have to pay for parking, they were savvy at downloading their devices, we could see absolutely everything. It was a good alternative.
Yeah. And I think, you know, somebody's just commented that it's not a complete replacement though. And I think you're right. But I sort of think, you know, if you're seeing, I don't know, one of your healthcare professionals 3, 4, 5 times a year or something, maybe 1 or 2 of them you do go in for, but others, maybe it might work better, especially, you know, if you've got a long, I remember I was speaking with somebody who, she travels 3 hours every time she sees an endocrinologist one way. It's, you know, so as a round trip, but and as David has said quite rightly, it's the Medicare telehealth changes that have enabled this new magic. But is the new magic here to stay? I don't like the idea of the magic being taken away. But I think that these are the sorts of things that will be really interesting to see what happens in coming months as we're coming out of this as well. But okay, so I wanted to ask, we're kind of on topic, but a little bit off it as well, a little bit. So for Frank and Ros, how have you been bringing light, you know, bringing joy into this? You know, it's so serious and it's a bit scary, and, you know, but what have you been doing so that it's not all doom and gloom? Ros, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, I feel in some ways like I've been preparing myself for this for a decade or more, Renza. So the things that bring me joy are things that I was doing anyway, but maybe it's just a bit more magnified. So every morning I meditate for 30 minutes, and it's been a long-standing practice, and it's a very grounding, those people who have signed in as participants, if you're meditators or you practice mindfulness even, you'd know that it's very grounding, it gives you clarity. And doing that each morning, and then I walk the dog. I either walk the dog or I take my adult son who doesn't have a support worker a couple of days a week. I take him in a wheelchair and we go, sometimes we walk for 2.5 hours. along the beach or down the river. But for me, one of the sources of light and joy is being in nature. And I just find being in nature and noticing the smallest of things, like just this week, the leaves, you know, and the wind, those beautiful autumn leaves coming down. I'm going to sound like I'm absolute, you know, flake here. I know, flaky and hippie and airy-fairy. But it is, it's like when you see your dog run through the sprinkler at the park and the water is sparkling, it doesn't matter how glum you've been feeling. It's like your spirit just lifts. And when I see my son, I was really worried about how Joe, he's got Down syndrome, autism, and an eating disorder. Thought, how is he going to cope? That was where my anxiety was. Mm-hmm. How is he going to cope with all these changes now that he's sort of can't go to science works, he can't go sailing? And he has actually settled into this rhythm of starting the day, being outside with the wind, the air, the sun, touching things. And so, look, there's a whole lot of things that, you know, I'll have a yoga practice, I, you know, do online gym stuff and so on. And I've discovered I really like my family.
That's a good thing.
I really have. I like my dog, I like my kids, I like my husband, you know.
That's nice.
It's like, it's good.
Greg, what about you? What have you been? I know that, you know, as you said, your days are still very similar, but have you been doing?
Yeah. It's probably going to be similar to what you've said, Ros. You know, I think when you have diabetes, looking after your mindset and your mental health is always something that I know I always look after. I guess, being outside is something that's really important to me. And I guess I've been making more of a conscious effort not to let that slip. You know, quite often I just go for a walk around my neighbourhood. I quite enjoy just looking at people's houses and front yards and mixing up my trails. I live quite close to the beach, so I have been making a bit more of a conscious effort to take advantage of that and go for walks along the coast. That's and I think also just being a bit more lenient on myself. I'm definitely getting more distracted than I normally would with my own routine at home, and you know, just giving myself a free pass to Netflix and chill.
Absolutely. Now we've got a couple of questions that are kind of on the same. Okay, so we'll take both of them, but Brigid, so I guess let's start with this. So we hear that people with diabetes are not necessarily more at risk of actually catching COVID-19, but if we do get it, we are at a higher risk of serious complications. Is that right? That's what, you know, I'm reading pretty much everywhere that seems to be consistent. Is that right?
That's right. So there were a couple of statements that kind of early on that's just basically broadly said people with diabetes have a higher risk of getting COVID. And that was probably more in terms of an elderly type 2 scenario where they have other things going on. And so multiple health issues. But you're absolutely right. For a type 1 person who is well controlled, their risk is not any higher in terms of catching it. They're no more susceptible. But you know what it's like when you get sick. It's harder work for you to manage your insulin dosing. So just trying to keep on track and keep well once you've got the COVID, I imagine, is 10 times harder when you have type 1 diabetes than the average person who's just coughing up a lung.
Yeah. So we have a question here from somebody. It's specifically actually about their child who has type 1 diabetes returning to school. And I know that we're seeing this in a lot of discussions in online diabetes groups, you know. So the question is, what advice would you have, noting that children are about to return to school full-time and for face-to-face teaching in New South Wales? You know, should parents be considering keeping kids at home, or should they be, you know, comfortable with their child returning to school? What I know that it's really hard to, you know, this is a very general conversation, obviously, but what are the sorts of things that people should be asking and considering when they're trying to make those decisions?
Oh, that's a tough call. I think each family has to make a call on their own, and they have to also think about who else is in the house. You know, if I had grandfather or great-grandfather living in the house with me and a bunch of kids going off to school, potentially my decision might be a bit different than if it's a young family. We know the kids are probably going to be okay, right? We know that they're not tending to get sick with this, so the kids themselves aren't going to be in trouble. it'll be who else is around them. That's what my take would be.
Yeah. Okay. And I think, I think it is always, as with everything, it's very individualized as to what we do. Now, restrictions are starting to be eased. I know that I personally have really felt quite concerned about that. But with restrictions being eased, what sort of tips would you have for people with diabetes? What sort of things, should we be thinking about to keep safe? So for Brigid, and then I want to ask Frank and Ros how they're feeling about this.
I think it's pretty much what we've been told: washing hands,
Yep.
the whole wipe, distance, all the things that are about that separation, physical separation. We know that works. And so as we move into spaces together again, we just need to maintain those practices.
Yep. Okay. So how Ros and Frank, how are you feeling about this? Frank, let me ask you first. How are you feeling?
People seem to be taking it more seriously now. So I am feeling better. I was more anxious in February and March when this was all getting started and people were still going overseas. People around me were coming home and not isolating like the government was telling them to. So I really think, I feel a lot more comfortable now. Businesses are taking it seriously. Obviously, being an essential worker, I'm seeing a lot of the hygiene and the social distancing and all those measures that are being ramped up. And just in general, the people, the behaviour I'm seeing is, people are taking this a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
So,
what about you, Ros? How are you feeling about restrictions starting to be eased?
Well, I'm thrilled that in some ways that they are being eased, but I'm still being very cautious myself. I haven't been in a supermarket for, I reckon, 7 weeks. My husband's been doing all the shopping. That's actually a great sadness to me because he has yet to learn how to, choose appropriate fruit and vegetables. But, that's another issue. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So I will start easing back, I think. But, I've been extremely cautious. One of the big decisions for me is, again, with my son that I mentioned earlier, whether he goes back into a group setting or not, and the potential risk of any spread there maybe coming home. So there's still decisions I, need to make over the next few weeks. Yeah. But I haven't been in a shop for quite some time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that this is something that we're all just starting to think about now and to work out what that's going to look like. So,
And I'm also older, Renza. I'm almost at that. That those categories they use where they say over 70 stay at home, 60 with a chronic decision. It's only a little inch away from that 60.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of jumping ahead. I'm very dutiful.
I get it. I think though I've really struggled with the way that it's almost sort of this throwaway thing that, everyone will be fine except for people, who have a chronic health condition or who are older. And I just think that perhaps we could be talking about that with a little bit more sensitivity. I think that that's been one of the things that I found a little bit concerning, I guess, through this. But so Ros, what is different? So for those of us living with diabetes or with a pre-existing health condition, what do we need to think about that's perhaps a little bit different to people who don't have who are not living with another health condition?
This wasn't one of the questions, everyone. By the way, this isn't one of the questions.
No, this was for Brigid. I'm sorry. Oh gosh, sorry. I did actually mean to ask Brigid that question. So sorry.
Oh, good.
Not for you. Take a deep breath.
I was actually waiting for Ros to answer the question, so I'd actually was.
It's yours. It's all for you, Brigid. Go.
Oh, so you don't want us to answer that then?
No.
Question again.
You guys take a deep breath. Have a drink. I'm going to have a drink too.
What was the question again?
It was.
Sorry. I just turned off. Ros was in charge.
I know it's not Ros. This is all for you, Brigid. I was just saying. So, what sort of things do people with pre-existing conditions need to think about? That's perhaps a little bit different to people who are not living with something like diabetes.
Well, you're going to be more tough on yourself, aren't you? So, it's the same as Ros. Ros, the one who is really at high risk is going to be in lockdown. People are going to do their shopping. All the kind of extra precautions you're going to take. You're not even going to try to go into Bunnings like I have been and standing on your little cross on the floor. really are going to exercise extra precautions.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Now we've had a couple of questions come in beforehand that was specifically around insulin pumping, actually. So we've got three actually. The three of us use insulin pumps. So Frank, let's go to you. Just had your 4th pump anniversary.
Yes,
what
I did.
Did you celebrate firstly?
Well, it was actually 10 o'clock at night, and I just had a pump start 2 days earlier, and
right.
it just came to me like, this is today's 4 years.
Yep. So tell us, what made you decide to start using an insulin pump?
I think I was unhappy. You know, I wasn't doing as well as I thought I could. And I think it was the right time for me. You know, I'd started linking in with people with diabetes and peer support, and I think that led me to look into it a bit more. It was something I wanted to give it a go. I didn't even know if it would be right for me, but I knew I wanted to try it. Yeah.
So let's just quickly, I'm sorry to pop you on the spot with this, but I was going to say in fact, I'll come back to you because I'll ask Ros what I've just asked you. But think about one massive challenge that you found when you started on a pump and one massive benefit. Okay? All right. Okay. But in the meantime, Ros, you've been pumping for 16 years.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's probably 16 years. So I heard about pumps soon after I was diagnosed. Yep. So it was my endo at the time who mentioned pumps and said, have a think about this as an option. I think it would suit you. And I read about it and I thought, yep, I want to give this a go. But I didn't have private health cover. So I had to sort of sit out 12-month wait before I could sort of have the cost covered. Yep. And so it was really just thrown out as an option very early to me. And when I read some of the literature that was suggesting more significant control, I thought I'd give it a go and stuck with it.
Yeah. So for me, I started pumping 3 years after diagnosis. So I've been using a pump now for 19 years. And for me, it was about flexibility. You know what? I wanted to be able to sleep in again. That was genuinely this promise, this idea that I could sleep in again was just, it was so attractive. And that was the thing that pushed me over the line. That and a bit more flexibility when it came to timing of meals and things. I mean, this was 19 years ago. So, you know, Daphne wasn't in Australia and there, you know, we were I was eating to the clock and feeding my insulin. So, you know, it was so appealing to me. But Frank, let me come back to you.
Okay.
Benefit, challenge.
Massive benefit's going to be similar to what you've said.
Yep.
Just the flexibility to time my basal rates to the hour of the day. That was a massive benefit for me, and also convenience. Just being out and about, it really does make it a lot more convenient. I can leave the house for a short period of time with nothing more than the pump and glucose tablets, but I wouldn't leave the house for a long period of time without backup.
Yep.
Massive challenge. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. I think for me it took at least 6 months to get to where I wanted to be. Be prepared to test your basal rates, test your insulin sensitivity, your carb ratios. It's not going to happen overnight. That was my major challenge.
Were you prepared for that? I know that, in fact, I think what you and I have had this conversation, Frank, is because I've been pumping for so long and I'm I can be a bit of a zealot about it. I've forgotten that really steep learning curve. And I probably, when people say, should I be on a pump? I'm like, yes, it's wonderful. It's so great. It's, and I forget that. So were you prepared for that, or were you only hearing about how great it was going to be and easy and how different and much easier your life was going to be?
No, I was prepared for that. And I had a diabetes educator at the time who made sure that I got that message. Her first words, she stopped me in my tracks and said, a pump is not going to be easier, she said. So I was prepared.
when I learnt to stop being so excitable about using a pump was when I had a parent of a kid with diabetes say to me, "It's like we've just been diagnosed again." And I went, wow, that really brought home what the change was. It was, you know, just such a learning curve, steep learning curve.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Ros, what about you? What got you started? What was the biggest challenge?
Yeah. Oh, look, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Really, I can't remember. But I do remember, some of the challenges for me is because I don't always pay attention, were occluded lines was a common problem, still is for me, because I get slack and I forget to change the lines and, you know, blah, blah. So occluded lines, and sometimes to the extent of getting like almost like a tennis ball of an infection, you know, needing to go to the doctor and have it syringed so it's worth the infection to get the, you know, that little thing happening. Trying to work out how to work with it when I was doing things back then. I used to do a lot of aerobics and so on. Trying to get it right with sport and activity was a bit of a struggle, but that's kind of a struggle for anyone, really. Kind of work
through it.
Yeah, but so, you know, but the benefits for me have just far outweighed any of those things.
Definitely.
And,
Well, I kind of guess, you know, 16 years down the track, that's. Yeah, you know, if there weren't those benefits, you probably would still be doing it. And that's how I feel 19 years down the track. So Brigid, what sort of things do you say to people when they come in and they say, or they're about to start on a pump or they're talking about it? What are the words of advice that you give to prepare people and so that they don't have unrealistic expectations?
One, we go through the pros and the cons, and one of the big challenges, we do highlight that it's going to feel like you get diabetes all over again. We use that phrase because people reflect and tell us that. The anxiety in that first week was like getting diabetes again. And so, especially in people who've had it for a long time, right? So you're talking 20, 30, 40 years, you've found your normal after 40 years of diabetes, and all of a sudden we throw a new normal at you. And so I just say, listen, it's going to take at least a week before you feel you know yourself, and then some time to then optimize the pump. But give it a week. Don't name that pump in the first week. Give it at least a week before you give it a name.
Good idea. Yeah.
It's going to be a happier pump.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really good advice. Really good advice. Frank, I do want to just quickly, I mean, we have 5 minutes. So if anybody does have any last minute questions, please get in quickly to ask them. But Frank, I did want to ask you a question because you are very involved in the diabetes online community and have, you know, so that diabetes support network that, you know, you've had around you for quite some time. Have you lent on that community during COVID-19, or have you found actually that it's been harder to keep in touch with people?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think in the beginning, I was probably definitely withdrawing a bit. And that was more to do with, just my mental health. And, you know, there's obviously a lot of headlines on social media. And there was a lot of, you know, people trying to editorialize this. But I think definitely in recent weeks, I am jumping in a lot more. What was the question again?
No, just, you know, have you still had that support network around
you? It is still around me. I'm part of a young adult diabetes committee here, and we have a Facebook group that we can all just have our rants at whatever times of the day. So that's really good as well. We have
and so
Zoom catch-ups.
Yeah, good. So, well, that's right. So you've been using Zoom. It's funny because I sort of feel like the diabetes online community has, you know, we are online. It's how we kind of communicate. You know, I've just noticed that we've got the Grumpy Pumper online from the UK, and he's, you know, obviously a big part of the community, and, you know, but, you know, I know Grumps and I communicate with him online. That's how we met, and that's, you know, that's how we speak. Somebody's actually asked, can I have the links to the diabetes online community? That's not a really easy thing just to say, because there's not really a link, but just two things that I would say is, if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag DOC to find the diabetes online community. Otherwise, you're in Australia, if you are in Australia and you're on Facebook, have a look at groups such as Australians Living with Type 1 Diabetes. diabetes, and there are groups that they're closed groups, but you can ask to join them. So that's probably a good way. Okay, we are actually just about to wrap up. So I'm going to do a quick whiz around, and everybody, I guess, a final piece of wisdom to share, and I am totally putting you on the spot with this because this wasn't something that we prepared, but a final word of wisdom to share about, you know what, it doesn't have to just be now, it can be about living with diabetes in general all the time. So I don't know, Brigid, do you want to start? What would you say?
I would say stay connected.
Yeah.
Stay connected with the people around you. Don't let this stop you being well or still socializing with the people that mean something to you, just in another way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really, really good advice. Really good advice. Ros, what would you say?
Think of yourself as somebody who has type 1 diabetes. Don't think of yourself as a diabetic. Don't let it define you.
Yeah. It's a bit of a language matters message in there. I'm always going to love that. And that's good. Thank you. Frank.
Don't compare yourself to others. I think it's easy to, I've seen a lot of things over the last 2 months, and you just have to remember that, everyone is different. We're all very unique, and we don't know what's going on in the, in the person behind the computer screen. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Don't compare yourself to others.
Really good advice for all the time. And mine is going to be kind to yourself, because I think that that's something that, I think as people with diabetes, we are often our harshest critics, and we expect perfect lines and we expect all sorts of things, and that's really tough. So thank you so much to the three of you. This has been wonderful, but that's all we have time for tonight. So I want to thank Brigid, Ros and Frank for joining us and for sharing their experiences and their wisdom. And I hope that all the people who've been watching, we've had heaps of people watching from all over the world, apparently. Thank you so much, and we hope that this has been a really useful conversation. As I mentioned at the beginning, our Type 1 Connects now will be happening every fortnight. So the next one is on the 2nd of June, and we're talking about diabetes burnout, which, oh my goodness, that is a session that I think so many of us could talk about for a very, very, very long time. And we have got an amazing, amazing speaker. It's clinical psychologist, Dr. Hendricks from the Australian Centre for Behavioural Research in Diabetes. I am lucky enough to work in the same building as Crystal. She is truly remarkable, and she will be here with us. She will be answering questions. You can come along and you can ask her lots of questions, and we will get to them. It's going to be a wonderful discussion. If you go to the Ipsomed's Facebook page or the website, and you can register, and I noticed that Tanya's just put up the link actually in the chat, so you can register from there straight away. Also, you can send through any questions in advance that you might have for Crystal, and we will answer them. But seriously, diabetes burnout, it is something that I know so many people experience. I know that very many of us have been talking about it and experiencing it during this time especially. So this is one that you absolutely don't want to miss. Thank you so much to everybody. I'm going to end this now, but I've had an absolutely wonderful time being here, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one. See you later, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.
Yeah.